At 62 years of age, I have spent the majority of my life adhering to the philosophy of simplicity. My heart belonged to my husband as we nurtured our two children together. I found fulfillment in my part-time role at the local library, and my evenings were often filled with the serene joy of tending to my rose bushes or losing myself in the pages of a captivating book. Excitement was never my pursuit. I remained steadfastly anchored in the familiar embrace of routine. I believed that would suffice. Yet, as autumn descended last year, a shift occurred. Never did I imagine that such an occurrence could befall me. I urge you to avoid the error I once made. On that day, the rain had fallen. Not a torrential downpour, merely a gentle, persistent drizzle that shrouds everything in a muted hue, leaving you with the sensation that silence has enveloped the world. The gentle cadence of the windshield wipers accompanied the car's journey along the road, creating a soothing backdrop to the unfolding scenery. To and fro, to and fro. We had just departed from a quarterly meeting at the Marriott Conference Center. A lengthy corporate affair, complete with uninspired chicken meals and tepid coffee. My husband, David, was unable to attend. He was bound to a dental appointment that he could not rearrange. His boss kindly extended the offer to drive me home, given that our residences were merely a few blocks away from each other. "Are you certain?" I inquired. "Certainly," he replied, a soft smile gracing his lips. "It's along my path, and I would appreciate the companionship." He went by the name Stephen Pierce, in his early 60s, perhaps just a few years my senior. Lofty and adorned with silver hair that appeared impeccably styled at all times. He possessed a serene quality, an air of composure, the sort of man whose gentle voice could still hold the attention of an entire room. I had known him for years, thanks to David. For nearly 2 decades, they collaborated, and each time I encountered Stephen, he exuded politeness and respect, nearly remote. Our exchanges had been fleeting, mere whispers woven into the fabric of polite laughter and the ambience of conference dinners. Yet, that afternoon carried an unmistakable air of distinction. The car was infused with the refreshing scents of cedar and mint, while the leather seats radiated warmth. Initially, our conversation was sparse, filled with the customary exchanges of pleasantries. The exhaustion we felt from endless meetings, the gloominess of the weather, the swift passage of the year. Then there was a pause, not awkward, just quiet, comfortable, almost. "You know," he said, glancing sideways at me, "you have a peaceful way about you." I smiled, feeling a sense of uncertainty about how to respond. "I suppose I've always aimed to be that way." "It doesn't always pan out," he chuckled, his gaze returning to the road ahead. "No one's peaceful all the time." The rain whispered softly against the windows as we glided through the tranquil suburbs. We strolled by the park that once served as a cherished playground for the kids during their younger days. I gazed out the window, memories tugging at the fringes of my mind. "Have you ever pondered what lies ahead?" he inquired. That took me by surprise. "What comes next in life?" he inquired. "After the kids grow up, after the job's not enough anymore, after the house feels too quiet." I hesitated at times, yet I strive not to linger on it. I've always been one to focus on what lies directly ahead. He nodded slowly. I once shared that perspective too. The tone of his voice shifted then, becoming slightly softer, tinged with a hint of sadness. I turned to face him. His gaze remained fixed on the road, but something lingered in his expression. Not quite sorrow, but a heaviness. A weariness that hadn't been present before. "I lost Helen 3 years ago," he said, and a knot tightened in my chest. "I'm so sorry," David told me, but we never delved into it. He nodded, reassuringly. "It's all right," he said. "It's just that when someone has been part of your rhythm for so long, the entire song feels off once they're gone." I found myself at a loss for words, so I remained silent, allowing the stillness to linger between us for a moment. Sometimes, silence carries more compassion than words. As we approached a red light, he finally turned to me, really looked at me, not in the way a man looks at the wife of a friend. Not the gaze of a superior upon a colleague's partner. There was an undercurrent, a depth, a questing look. "I envy David," he murmured, his voice barely above a whisper. My breath hitched. "Why?" "Because he still has you." His words held a weight that was neither crude nor flirtatious. They were imbued with a sincerity that felt almost too profound. I opened my mouth to respond, but the light shifted to green, and we resumed our journey. The words lingered, trapped in my throat. Silence enveloped us for the remainder of the drive. When we finally arrived at my driveway, the rain had ceased. It was only met with the sound of water dripping from the branches above. I reached for the door handle, searching for a thought, anything that might ease the strangeness of this moment, the tension that hung between us. Then he spoke. "Would you mind if I ask you something honest?" I turned back to him, my movements deliberate. "I suppose that depends. Do you ever feel invisible?" The question lingered, heavy and palpable, like a breath held too long. My fingers slipped from the door handle. I could have lied. I could have laughed it off, but I didn't respond. Instead, I simply looked at him and nodded. He extended his hand, palm up, a silent invitation lingering in the air between us. I chose not to take it. Not at that moment. Yet, I didn't turn away either. That night, sleep eluded me. David lay beside me, softly snoring, his arm resting across his chest as it always did. Everything remained unchanged, just as it had been for years, same house, same routine, same man. Yet, my thoughts were restless. Stephen's question reverberated in my mind. "Do you ever feel invisible?" I gazed at the ceiling for what seemed like an eternity, observing the delicate shadows from the window walls across the plaster. I felt no anger, nor was I flattered. What coursed through me was something far more intricate, a gradual unspooling of a tension I hadn't recognized was tangled within. It transcended mere attraction. It wasn't even about Stephen. It was about the profound desire to be seen, truly seen, not merely as a wife, a mother, or a neighbor who remembers to tend to her lawn, but as a woman, a complete individual. And it had been ages since anyone had looked at me that way. The next morning unfolded like any other, with coffee brewing, toast popping, the cat being fed, and David's shirts neatly folded from the dryer. Yet an unsettling feeling lingered, as if the furniture had been subtly shifted, causing me to stumble against the edges. Around noon, my phone buzzed, a text from Stephen Pierce. "Hope I didn't make you uncomfortable yesterday." That wasn't my intention. I found myself staring at the screen for what felt like an eternity before crafting my reply. "You didn't." I just wasn't expecting it. His response came almost instantly. "Me neither." That was all. Just 2 words. Yet, they bore a weight I hadn't anticipated. We fell into silence for a few days, and I hoped that would mark the end of it, a fleeting moment in a car destined to dissolve into the past. But it didn't. Instead, it hung in the air, persistent. The following week, David casually mentioned that Stephen had invited a few people over for a small dinner. "You're welcome to come, too," he said, nonchalantly buttering his toast. I maintained a neutral expression. "Sounds nice." Things have felt different lately," David remarked. "Ever since Helen passed." "I think he's trying to reconnect with people," I mused, taking a sip of my coffee. I kept my thoughts to myself. The dinner was set for the following Saturday, casual, nothing extravagant. A handful of couples from the office, with soft jazz wafting through the air. Stephen's home exuded tastefulness, adorned with bookshelves, framed records lining the walls, and a warm, inviting glow. When David and I arrived, Stephen welcomed us at the door, dressed in a navy sweater layered over a crisp white button-down, his sleeves rolled up to his forearms. His expression remained unchanged upon seeing me, yet his gaze lingered for a fraction longer than required. The evening unfolded in a haze of chatter and laughter. I engaged in light conversation with David's colleagues, praised the wine, and assisted in the kitchen. Everything felt wonderfully mundane, yet I sensed his eyes on me from across the room. Not in a menacing manner, but as if he were anticipating something. Later, after dessert, I ventured out onto the back deck. The night air was crisp, and the garden lights cast soft glows across the hedges. I leaned on the railing, breathing in the scent of wet leaves. "Thought I might find you out here," Stephen said behind me. I didn't turn around. Needed some air. He stepped beside me, leaving a respectful space between us. "You look distracted," he said. I laughed quietly. "That's one word for it. I meant what I said, about you having a peaceful way. But I also see something else." I looked at him now, frowning slightly. "What do you mean?" There stood someone, burdened yet resolute, concealing their struggles from the world. I found myself unable to respond. The truth weighed heavily. Fragments of my being had been hidden away for far too long. Aspirations, desires, and regrets lay entangled in a shroud of silence and practicality, as I had convinced myself they were insignificant. Yet, in that fleeting moment, with Stephen beside me beneath the gentle glow of outdoor lights, I felt them awaken. He turned to me with a softness that pierced through my defenses. "You deserve more than invisibility." Those words, seemingly inconsequential, resonated deeply. I had a good life, a stable marriage, loving children. Yet, tears unexpectedly welled at the corners of my eyes, unbidden. "I should go inside," I murmured. He didn't stop me. He didn't reach out. He simply nodded. But just before I crossed back through the sliding glass door, I caught his words, so soft they nearly escaped me. "You don't have to disappear just because you're loved." In that instant, the ground shifted beneath me. Quietly, irrevocably. The following week, I navigated my life as if enveloped in a fog. David noticed my silence, a stark contrast to my usual self of the ordinary, yet he attributed it to a cold or perhaps hormones. Our marriage had granted us the ability to decipher each other's moods, though the underlying causes often eluded us. I kept my thoughts to myself. Stephen's words echoed in my mind, "You don't have to disappear just because you're loved." That phrase lingered, shadowing me as I folded laundry, murmuring in my ear while I tended to the garden, embedding itself in my thoughts during sleepless nights. I had no intentions, no desires for trouble lingered in the air, yet something within me felt stirred, neither shattered nor ruined, merely unsettled. Perhaps it had been too complacent for far too long. Midweek, I found myself in the grocery store, standing in the produce aisle, caught in a silent debate over two brands of grapes when a familiar voice broke through my thoughts. "Try the red ones, they're less tart." I turned to see Stephen a few feet away, a basket in hand and a bag of apples dangling from his arm. We exchanged smiles, tinged with a hint of awkwardness. "Well," I ventured, "I didn't expect to see you here." "I come on Wednesdays," he replied. "It's quieter." "I hate fighting over parking spots." We shared a laugh, a spark of intelligence hanging in the air. A silence enveloped us once more, yet this time it was thick with awareness, a departure from mere pleasantries. He adjusted his position, his voice dropping to a softer tone. "Would you like to grab a coffee?" "Just to talk." My heart raced. He shrugged casually. "Or whenever suits you. No pressure, just a conversation." I should have declined. I recognized that. But I didn't. Soon, we found ourselves in a quaint cafe by the park, one of those inviting spots adorned with mismatched chairs and chalkboard menus. We settled by the window, the world outside fading into a blur. Stephen chose black coffee, while I opted for tea. For a time, our conversation drifted away from David and the office, focusing instead on the essence of life itself. He shared the profound loneliness that enveloped him after Helen's passing, recounting mornings when he would momentarily forget her absence, only to be struck anew by the heaviness of loss. I listened intently, not as David's wife or a neighbor, but simply as a woman sharing a moment with a man revealing his truth. When the moment came for me to speak, I found myself taken aback by my own words. With what emerged, I confessed, "I don't believe I've ever allowed myself to desire anything that lacked reason." He regarded me with a gentle gaze. "That sounds exhausting," he remarked. "It is," I whispered back. We lingered in silence for a moment, observing the rain as it resumed its descent outside the window. Passers-by hurried by with umbrellas, heads bowed, absorbed in their own existences. Then, in a soft tone, he asked, "Would you allow me the pleasure of seeing you again? Just for coffee?" Nothing more. I locked eyes with him. They held no demands or expectations, merely a quiet patience. My heart thudded in my throat. I had mentioned only coffee, yet we both understood it would evolve beyond that, not driven by reckless longing or a wish to cause pain, but due to an undeniable connection that had quietly emerged between two individuals who had long been masquerading as complete. Upon returning home, I found David in the garage, mending the dripping garden hose. He greeted me with a wave and a smile, as if all was well. And on the surface, it truly was. I prepared dinner. We sat together for the news. I leaned in to kiss him goodnight. Yet, as I lay in bed that night, a truth I had long resisted began to surface. I was no longer merely anticipating Stephen's next move. I found myself yearning for it. It was a Thursday afternoon when his message arrived. "Stephen Pierce, are you free tomorrow morning? I know a quiet place by the lake. Good coffee. No pressure." I gazed at the words, my thumb poised above the screen. The week had dragged on, each hour stretching into an unanswerable question. And now, here it was, the answer, beckoning for me. I typed yes and hit send before I could talk myself out of it. The next morning, I told David I was going to the farmer's market. He didn't question it. He was heading into the city for a team meeting, already half distracted by a conference call. I watched him pull out of the driveway, waving from the porch, the familiar ache of routine wrapping around me like a shawl. Then I got in my car and drove in the opposite direction. The cafe was tucked away near the lake, small, quiet, nearly empty on a Friday morning. Stephen was already there when I arrived, seated at a table by the window. As I stepped inside, he looked up and something in his expression softened. No smile, just a quiet acknowledgement. I took a seat across from him. For a time, silence enveloped us. We sipped our drinks, attuned to the ambient sounds, the delicate clink of cups, the sporadic whisper of wind against the glass. Finally, he broke the stillness, saying, "Thank you for coming." I nodded, at a loss for words. My gaze remained fixed on his. We meandered through conversations about everything and nothing at all. About the sensation of time eluding our grasp, about the passage of years that brings with it the awareness that the most profound aspects of our being yearn for acknowledgement, for connection, even if it's merely through the lens of understanding. He refrained from reaching for my hand. I held back from leaning across the table, yet something lingered between us that morning, an undeniable current. As we departed, he accompanied me to my car. I opened the door, placing my bag inside, but I hesitated to enter. I simply stood there, the early sun shimmering on the lake behind him, the wind tugging at the edges of his jacket. He regarded me with a careful gaze. "Tell me what you're thinking." I paused, gathering my thoughts, then spoke softly. "I think I've spent most of my life adhering to expectations, and I take pride in that. I'm proud of my marriage, of raising good children, of maintaining a welcoming home. Yet, somewhere along the way, I ceased to inquire about my own desires. And now, here I am, conversing with someone who recognized that before I did." He stepped a fraction closer, yet still refrained from touching me. "I've never wanted to hurt David," I confessed. "I know," he replied. "Neither do I. But that the world behind me was fading, a blur of memories and moments left behind. The road stretched ahead, a winding path into the unknown. I could still feel the weight of his gaze, a lingering presence that tugged at my heart. The hum of the engine was a steady reminder of my resolve, each mile a step toward rediscovery. I took a deep breath, the air filled with possibility, and let the journey unfold before me. Him standing there, hands tucked into his pockets, observing my departure. No pursuit, no shouts, merely allowing me to slip away. That evening, I found myself on the back porch with David. The warmth of the air enveloped us, and the sky was painted with the gentle hues of sunset. He rambled on about the new internet project, mentioning her confusion over the filing system, but my mind drifted elsewhere. Finally, I turned to him. "David," I said softly. He met my gaze, taken aback by the gravity of my voice. "Do you think I've changed?" He knitted his brow. His brow. Changed how? Since the kids moved out. Since we got older. Since life got quieter. He took a long breath, then said, "Maybe. But so have I. We all do, don't we?" I nodded. Then I reached for his hand. "Would you notice?" I asked if I disappeared a little. His face shifted just slightly. Enough. He squeezed my hand. I'd notice. For the first time in a long time, I felt something unspoken pass between us. Maybe it was the beginning of a reckoning. Maybe not, but it was real. That night, I didn't dream about Stephen. I found myself not contemplating coffee shops or the tranquil stillness by the lake. Instead, my thoughts drifted to the woman I once was and the one I still had the opportunity to become.